discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. And next is the GLS presentation.
Okay, at the January board meeting, the board asked that we put together a detailed implementation plan. And originally, the idea was presented on February 13th. The board made the decision to postpone it for 2 weeks so that parents would have the opportunity to review the documents on the website. The first section is about the proposed phase-in, and this incorporates into it the budget presentation that was made at the last meeting regarding future reductions in sections. And so it's not necessarily a given that this is what will happen, because the board so far is committed to what you see up here, which is all kindergartners and first grade students at Nassau next year with 5 sections in each of those 2 grade levels. Second grade being split into 2 buildings so that students wouldn't have to move from Hagen to Nassau and then back to Hagen. And that would have also 5 sections. 5 sections also in grades 3 and 4, and all of those classes would be at Hagen. And then the board had decided in one section, one grade level that they would reduce for next year was grade 5 because it had the lowest number of students, and with 4 sections would still have an average class size of 22.25. The rest of this now is undecided by the board. This is where we talk about the phase-in both in terms of where the classes are, but the number piece has not been decided by the board. So this is all information from the 3-year budget reduction packet, but it's still just in a proposed stage. The board would have to make the decision next year and the year after as to how many sections they want at each grade level. My recommendation in the budget packet was to go down to 4 sections in grades 3, 4, and 5 was already there, so maintain that at 4. And to maintain 5 sections in the primary grades, K1 and 2. And this shows you what those class sizes would be in that scenario. The following year, I recommend to the board, for the sake of the tax cap, that we go to 4 sections in each grade level, with the exception of kindergarten, and that's where you come up with class sizes of approximately 25, 26 per grade. During some of the work we were doing on this, building names came up as an issue, something we haven't talked about as a board at all, and certainly probably one of the least of the issues on the table, but there were parents and teachers who were involved in various committees and conversations who suggested the idea of perhaps changing the name so that you might have, for example, Spackenkill Primary or Spackenkill Intermediate. If you did that, you would only have one school in the district that had a different sort of name, because you wouldn't have Spackenkill Middle School, you have Orville Todd Middle School. So the possibility might be to name all 3 of the other buildings, the 2 elementary and the high school, after a person. You could keep them Hagen and Nassau as well. Some of the thoughts was that it might help to sort of get rid of the differentiation between the neighborhoods. Other people felt it's fine to keep the names as they are. If you were to change the names to Spackenkill Primary and Spackenkill Intermediate, the cost would be a little over $5,000 for the signage. So just to give you an idea on what that would entail. Schedule for both schools, as a result of parent feedback that we heard primarily at these meetings, was changed so that we would have students beginning to arrive at 8:20, at which time they would report directly to the class instruction would end at 2:45, and at 2:45, the walkers would be dismissed. Bus riders would be dismissed a little later at 3 o'clock, and the reason for doing that is to allow parents who have children who are bus riders in one school and pick up in another school to have time to get home from picking up their child to be there when the bus leaves. A question came up about performing groups. All of the performing groups will be at Hagen because that's where the higher grades are. And this was the schedule that they developed for their meeting times. They continue to meet before school, and they would follow the schedule listed here as far as who meets when. The academic program remains unchanged. Same time allotted for all the core classes and specials. Clubs and murals will continue to be offered at both buildings, and the bus will continue to be offered as it is currently. We anticipate that the YMCA program will continue. We have no plans of discontinuing it, so unless they decided that they had a concern about it, that program would continue, and a shuttle would be available from Nassau to Hagen for students to attend that program, and from Hagen to Nassau in the morning so that students can go to the before-school program. Special education programs continue to be offered based on the individual IEPs of the students. In terms of personnel assignment, on Friday, February 10th, all teachers and staff were notified of their assignments for next year. Pending the decision of the commissioner, they understand that should the commissioner overturn the board's decision, that these assignments would not take effect. Employees then had the opportunity to meet with me if they had questions regarding their assignment. Just so you know, only one did. Of all of the staff involved, every teacher got his or her first or second choice out of 3 choices. Transitions is certainly a big topic. Teachers at both elementary schools actually began working together this past summer. They did that when we initially grouped the teachers by building in building leadership teams with the idea that each building would set goals for the building. And the teachers themselves, with the principals, decided that they would really like to work together on common goals because whether they become grade level or not, they knew that this was in the works as a possibility, that it would be beneficial for the district to have common expectations and common standards and to be working toward the same goals. So they have already been meeting as building leadership teams, and their work has continued into the school year. As a result of that work, both schools already have common behavioral expectations for students and are using the same terminology. Transitions for next year's kindergarten students. That means kids who are not in the school system right now, incoming kindergarten students. We have held this past week kindergarten registration at Nassau, screening, orientation, fun day, and a week-long summer program that has existed for years would be held at Nassau with Nassau staff present. Current practice and special schedule the first 2 days of the school year would continue. For example, the first day, kindergarten students come in, I believe it's an hour later, 9 o'clock, and their parents bring them so that it helps to not have to put them on a bus the first day. The second day, they come in at the regular time, but they only stay a half a day, and then it's not until the third day that they have a regular full schedule. For next year's first grade students, the Hagen students in kindergarten this year will be transported to Nassau in June for an orientation program. Parents will be invited to attend an evening orientation, and the new first graders will be invited to visit Nassau during the summer with their parents to get acclimated to the new school. On the first day of school in September, the new first graders will be greeted by their current kindergarten teachers who will not have students until 9 o'clock, so they have the ability to, actually a little later because it's a later start time, they would be able to meet their students from this year in the lobby and escort them to their first grade classrooms as a way of helping to ease the transition. Dr. Cecina will meet with students on the first day of school, and the school will host a social event for all students and families in September. There we go. For next year's third, fourth, and fifth graders, it's actually fairly similar. The fourth and fifth graders from Nassau will be invited to visit Hagen. I think he's getting on still. Yeah, I'm sorry. Next year's third, fourth, and fifth graders. This year's second, third, and fourth graders will be transported to Hagen for an orientation program. Parents will be invited to an evening orientation, and the teachers of second graders and third graders, the second and third grade teachers for the next year. This year's second grade teachers, next year's third grade teachers, this year's third grade teachers, next year's fourth grade teachers, and this year's fourth grade teachers and next year's fifth grade teachers will meet in the spring to carefully build next year's classes. This is something that the fifth grade teachers currently do with the sixth grade teachers. They meet, they talk about the needs of the students, interactions between students, who gets along well together, who may have some issues being in the same class together, and they build a class that they think will be a good, productive learning environment. Then again, the new students to Hagen would be invited to visit Hagen in the summer with their parents. Mr. Farrell would meet with students on the first day of school, and the school would host a social event for all students and families in September. Additionally, not so much by grade level, this month Hagen and Nassau held joint special education projections meetings at the exit and entrance grade levels so that they could have a better sense of the programming for the new configuration. Students at each grade level from both schools will work together on a joint curricular project as a means of getting to know each other. A perfect one that has been ongoing is the example of the Shark trip in fifth grade. That's a perfect example of a curricular kind of program that the students join together to do to get to know one another. I know that this year the fourth grade teachers are actually planning their trip to Albany together. The teachers will be discussing particular grade level plans for each grade when they meet on April 9th for the conference day. This month, actually it's March, the school social workers will lead a workshop for parents on dealing with change, and if there's an interest to hold more sessions, they will schedule more as needed. In addition, the principals are investigating the possibility of hosting Authors' Day jointly this year. The only problem has been that there requires a renegotiation of the contract they have with the author because of the way it's set up at this time for the schedule, but they are looking at that. We talked about the fourth grade trip, and the PTA is working with the schools to schedule joint events for the families to get to know one another. In September, all 4 district-level administrators will be present at the elementary schools for arrival and dismissal, certainly the first week and longer if necessary, to assist in making sure that buses run smoothly, that students get on and off buses at the correct places, that students get to their classrooms without concern. There are several transitions for teachers as well. As we already discussed, the building leadership teams began to meet together this summer, and they continue to meet jointly to plan for the move to grade level schools. They met on November 8th to discuss grade level events in terms of, what do we do as a special assembly in second grade here or third grade here, and also to talk about possible joint curricular projects. As we said, they will continue their planning April 9th. They'll have 3 half-days for packing in June because most of them will have to move classrooms, even if it's within the same building. They may be shuffled from one wing to another because of the change in the format. And then this summer, they will have time to do some additional curriculum work as new grade teams. For the teachers who will be leaving us, to either find new jobs or at least maintain current with their experience and knowledge. And so we will provide assistance with resumes, assistance with getting interviews whenever possible. We would give them first opportunities for leave replacement positions and permanent substitute positions in the district. And we would allow them to continue to participate in professional development activities while they are accessed and unemployed. So that, if we're offering professional development on the Common Core standards, it doesn't hurt us to have a few more teachers there at the training, and yet it will help them to maintain current so that when they do have an opportunity for a job, they will have some experience and will be able to speak knowledgeably about the new trends in education and the new requirements. Materials, a lot of this really was in the original presentation. We don't need any new textbooks at this point. There was one textbook that Nassau had not been using, the ELA that Hagan was using, and it was determined that whether we switched to grade level or not, Nassau should have that book, so those have already been purchased. Additional level readers need to be ordered for both schools so that they can have a stronger library of level readers. Equipment and supplies will be divided between the buildings. Originally, the music teachers thought they would need some more music for the third grade chorus. As they got further into the process, they felt that this was no longer the case, that they had enough music that they could use for the various grade levels. That was a small amount, to be honest. That was only $1,000, but they no longer need that music. In terms of facilities, grade levels that have smart boards presently will continue to have smart boards, and we expect to be able to schedule classes as efficiently as possible so that no smart boards will have to be moved. The committee that met in the summer recommended that no changes be made to the playground because they would like to give principals time to assess the usage during the first year and really have a better sense of what they would need that's different. Bathroom fixtures are, for the most part, suitable in each building. One difference, one exemption to that, is that in the 3 to 5 school, partitions between the stalls would have to be made higher since the kids are taller. And this will be done by our own staff during the summer at a cost of approximately $7,500. Since doing this, in fact, just last week, we received a phone call from Senator Solan's office telling us that we had been granted $21,000 in something called Bullet Aid, and it's specifically for minor facilities work. So this will be something that we'll be able to use that funding for, as well as a few other small projects. Rental trucks would have to be acquired during the summer, at which time our own custodial and grounds and maintenance people would move all of the furniture, equipment, and boxes to the appropriate buildings. Teachers have been told that this would be completed by August 1st, so that they would have a month to settle into their classrooms. That cost is approximately $3,500. Michelle Maloney has begun and will continue to meet monthly with the building principals and the director of facilities to keep track of the facilities work that is being done, to supply the teachers with the moving supplies they needed, and to give them directions for labeling boxes and equipment. And then, as mentioned before, teachers would have 3 half days at the end of June for packing. Also, in facilities, principals have developed a tentative outline of what the building plan would look like in terms of, which grade level would be in which hallway. They have made it very clear that we have to express this is tentative because they haven't assigned specific teachers to specific rooms. They may change the location of an AIS room, a special education room. They really just found out who their new staff would be February 10th as well. They need time to meet with their staff and get input from them as to the specifics of the plan. But a general outline of the plan is found in Appendix F, which is on the internet. It has been. The other thing that we did, we developed a sort of joint map, also in Appendix F, that tries to fit all of the students and programs into Hagen. And this was done because there have been, and still are, parents asking, well, can't we close Nassau? And what this map demonstrates is that there is not sufficient space at Hagen for the entire elementary program. It's not simply a number of students, even though, Hagen has had probably close to 500 students at some point, and now they're more like 400. It's not about numbers of bodies, it's about the program and the number of sections at each grade level, which gets scheduled differently. So that, for example, you would not only need more art staff in the building, which would be a given since you need 2 teachers in the 2 buildings, but you would need additional space because you couldn't schedule all of the sections of K through 5 from both schools into one classroom. You don't have enough periods in the day to do that. So there are things like an art room that would be needed. There would be space for musical instruments. There would be additional AIS space. If you look at the map, the board who has that in front of you, you'll notice some classrooms are labeled AIS. And we don't need an entire classroom for AIS, but we do need at least 9 teaching stations for AIS. And the map that you see actually incorporates more than 1 teacher into each of those AIS classrooms. If they're a regular sized classroom, we've accounted for 2 or 3 teachers to be in that room with partitions. So it's not that we're going to have 5 students in a regular sized classroom with 1 teacher. The BOCES piece, we currently rent 2 rooms to BOCES at a revenue of about $24,000. Certainly that is not the primary reason for saying we don't have space. I think the biggest reason for the consideration of not enough space is that as that map is scheduled right now, it presumes 4 sections at every grade level except kindergarten. If down the road, the board decides not to go with a recommendation for 4 sections at each grade level and decides, maybe in the 3rd year of the budget reductions, we're not going to go that route, we're going to try to get the 60% to overcome the tax cap, you wouldn't have room for those extra classrooms as well as some of the special classrooms that are in there. It's very, very tight. And I actually am almost positive, and we'll double check, but even if you wanted to talk about building on, first of all, it would take a couple of years. And I believe the architects at one time told us there is actually no space on the Hagen campus to do that in terms of usable building space. We looked at school lunch. Lisa French, who is the school lunch director, is meeting with her colleagues at primary schools in the county to discuss special menus for primary children. The idea being that for young children who have less developed fine motor skills, there are foods that are better for them to eat. For example, chicken nuggets instead of spaghetti. So she's trying to find healthy choices that actually are more kid-friendly. Then we come to the financials. Again, this picture presumes that the board follow the recommendations in the budget cuts. If that changes, and if the board decides, no, we're going to keep 5 sections at any of those other grade levels down the road, the numbers are different. In the first year, you have a savings of 4 regular classroom teachers, and we did this with grade level and without, so you can see the difference. Those classroom teachers would be cut regardless, so that's the same. If we went to grade level schools, you would be able to cut a half a librarian and 24 art, 25 clerical, and 1 office monitor. There are costs, particularly in the first year, and what those costs entail are 1 library monitor that we cover purposes of making err on the side of safety, we will keep that in there as a cost and reevaluate. At the beginning of the year, we'll have plenty of staff who for the first month or so will be able to help in the morning and afternoon. If we find we still need a monitor, that will be taken care of. The facilities work is $7,500, and as I said, that is now available through funding from Senator's Lab. Moving expenses, $3,500, instructional expenses, $6,000. So the net savings in year one with grade level is $458,188. Without is $380,000. And there's not, granted, a large difference in terms here, partially because of costs. And the other reason, I think, too, is that we're still maintaining 5 sections in most of the grades. In the second year, we would save an additional 2 classroom teachers, and the other half of the librarian, we would only need 1 librarian to travel between the buildings. The librarian costs saves us more in the second year because while the librarian is 25 next year, she still gets benefits. So we can't eliminate the benefits until the second year, so that's the reason for the difference in the 2 numbers. So the savings in year 2, 241,000, almost 242 versus 190 without GLS. 2015, 14, 15, another 2 regular classrooms, only 1 would be possible without grade level schools. And the problem, if you look at some of the numbers as best you can in predicting the future, is that without grade level schools, you don't have the option of going to 4 sections on a grade level. Because you have some classes at Nassau that are 38 and 40. Those classes could not be reduced to 1 section. And in order to have 4 sections, that means you have to have only 2 sections at 2 sections at Nassau. Just as you can't reduce Haiti to 2 sections by itself, you can't reduce Nassau to 1 section. So the only way you can ever get to 4 sections in that scenario is with grade level schools. Total savings over 300 years is about $890,000 versus $665,000. If you look at it, we're compounding over the years because each year you continue to save the amount from that year. You're looking at about $2.1 million versus $1.6 million. And just to note that all of these estimates assume a couple of things. One is that no further facilities work would be required after year 1. And for the sake of planning at this point, we really just kept all of the salaries the same for all 3 years. We didn't project increases. So that's important to know. There is another presentation on transportation following this. So that will be addressed separately, but does the board have any questions about this presentation?
Lois, the shuttle for the YMCA, is that something that they pay for, the YMCA, or do we pay for that?
We pay for it.
We pay for it.
Just as we transport kids to daycare, essentially it's a daycare program.
The new level readers books, do we need those because we are?
Can't share over here.
The new readers, the level readers.
Have to be your mic, sorry. Is it
You have to get it right at top row.
Is it on now?
Yes.
Okay, the level readers, did we need to buy those with or without the grade level schools, or just because grade level schools?
just because of grade level.
Okay.
But you have to have some overlap. You have to be able to have some at lower reading levels for the upper grades because students are in different places, just as you need some higher level ones for students in lower grades. So when you're separating the grades out like that, you sort of need to supplement the libraries, the level reading library so that you have a range, and right now, it's more by building, because they're all in the same building together.
Okay, now, the facilities was the 7,500, that's gonna be coming from, the grant we got from Senator Command, so is it calculated here in the net saving, or you didn't take it out yet?
It has been counted against the savings at this point, because this was actually done before we learned the grant. We actually found out about the grant, I think it was last Thursday.
Okay, so we need to add this into the savings then?
Yes.
Okay. Moving trucks, why do we need to rent moving trucks? We have our own trucks, can we use those if it's a short
We
distance?
really only have more like pickup trucks. You would need a closed truck, particularly if it were going to be raining, to stack the boxes and really get the best, usage of it, because you wouldn't be able to fit as many into the pickup truck and stack them higher than the truck, of course, and if it was raining, it would be a mess. But we could take a look at it.
So if we go back to that slide, the compounding, so just give me an explanation of where the number came from for the 2.0 and the 1.6, not three times though.
It's essentially 3 times minus the costs. So, minus, because the costs we only accounted for in 1 year.
So for instance,
Well, it's 3 times for year 1, 2 times for year 2, 1 time for year 3, and the costs were only counted once.
Hasn't been on all night. But it's,
thank you. As a result of some of the questions that came up from our discussion of grade level schools, the superintendent directed that we form a transportation committee based on feedback from the community members and other district committees. The committee was comprised of parents and Dr. Berkowitz and myself. The committee was charged with providing input to us so that we could speak about and communicate in a very clear and comprehensive way how the school day and the transportation plan was going to work. The schedule for the school day and the transportation schedule, it's very important to note, are codependent upon each other. So administration, and you'll see in the next few slides, looked at many areas in order to make sure that the schedule, the post-curriculum schedule, was developed, and then the transportation schedule was built around the curriculum schedule. Next, we just listed the community members. We met several times on Thursday night. They gave their input, which we most appreciated, and we very much appreciated the fact that they spent a lot of time with us. One of the things that was talked about when we developed the curriculum schedule was arrival and dismissal times. One of the things that we wanted to make sure was that we could prevent changing the Todd and the high school arrival and dismissal times. For late buses, we wanted to make sure that we still had late buses available for both the high school and the middle school. We wanted to ensure that teaching time was maximized and we minimized any lost instructional time due to travel with the teachers. We also made sure that we stayed within the teacher's contractual day and tried to provide maximum contact time with our students. The first transportation committee was held on January 26th, and some of the questions that were raised were as far as how walkers were going to be considered. The number of families with students in both schools was discussed. The viability of a referendum for full busing just for elementary schools, and what a region referred to tonight was the daycare shuttles. Some of the concerns that came up as a result of our first meeting was the traffic pattern at the K2 building. Any unique situation where a family may have a required walker in one school, but in the second school they would have be eligible for transportation. Another concern was that the district would consider a different start time for the buildings, the length of the bus runs, and the plan for arriving and departing students. After that meeting, we met again on February 2nd, and we sat with the Transportation Committee and reviewed the answers to the questions that we just previously discussed. First question that came up was, can the buses at the K2 building go into a playground to allow for a loop to be created for any driving parents? We had a very lengthy conversation about that, and what we looked at, and we involved the principal currently at the K2 building, and what we decided was that we would have a safety consultant of the district's insurance program to come down and look at the drop-off and the pickup at both schools, at both Hagen and Nassau. There was a question as to whether there would be an AM and PM shuttle for the daycare program at the 3-5 building. And another question that came up today was, when we say daycare shuttle, what we would do is at the K2 building, we would provide, just like any other daycare, a bus would pick up the students at Nassau, and as part of its run over to the Hagen area, would have a stop designed just for the students that are going to the daycare. And the other piece of it was that the K2, the 3-5 school begins at 7 a.m., the program does, and the after-school program ends at 6 p.m., and that we're looking to still consider having that program, and that we can contact the school for daycare information. Question regarding kindergarten students being sitting in the back of the bus or the front of the bus was raised, and the question about whether we could have preferred seating for the kindergarten students at the front of the bus, and the answer to that is yes, we can. The next two questions have to do with how can we ensure that all the children will board the correct bus, and the students in the K2 building, any K2 students, will receive different color tags in the beginning of the year to identify both their grade and their bus route. And as the superintendent indicated, we will have monitors present to help unload and load the students. The same thing goes for the 3-5 building. The next question is that if there was a daycare shuttle between the buildings, for instance, Nassau coming over to Hagen, can a parent that's picking up a student at that school pick up their child because they're going to come over on a shuttle bus? And the answer to that would be, it probably would not be feasible to do that, because as you'll see as we go through the plan, the walkers are going to be dismissed at 2:45 in order to provide sufficient time for parents to meet their child if they were getting off a bus at another school. And so the buses aren't getting out till 3 o'clock. Somebody may be waiting a half hour for that bus to come over from another school. What came up throughout our discussions was how many families would be affected by having a child at one school eligible and another child that is required to walk. And at the present time, without counting the kindergarten registration that just happened this week, we had 12 families in this situation. 3 were from Hagen and 9 were from Nassau. Question about the number of walkers being reduced or changed due to grade level schools. Once again, not counting kindergarten students, the number of walkers would be reduced district-wide from 166 walkers to 84 walkers. There would be 58 walkers at Nassau, as opposed to 103 that we have today, and 26 walkers at Hagen versus 63 that we have today. Can we have a full referendum for busing? And if so, can we only have it for elementary? The answer to that is yes. The community could vote to have full busing for elementary only. The board would have to approve the referendum and give 45 days notice. If we held the referendum at the same time as the budget vote, there would be no additional cost. If we had it at another time, the cost would be approximately $3,200. What would be the cost if we were to go to full-day busing? As you saw before, we have approximately 84 students right now under grade level schools that would be eligible for transportation. Knowing that not all students would opt to ride the bus, or parents would opt to put the students on the bus, in the first year we would probably estimate that we would need 2 buses, and then depending on what the ridership was in the second year, we may be able to go down to 1 bus, and we've been using the figure of $65,000 for additional bus costs. We then asked after that meeting for feedback from the committee about having clear communication, and we heard that the administration, that we should have more visual representation of the bus routes in the school day. And the routes that are being shown here today and the routes that are on the website, as we've discussed before, are tentative. Transportation has not been accommodated for the kindergarten students for kindergarten registration. We still are waiting for private school transportation. So those routes are going to be modified as we go through the plan up until, as we do each year when school starts. Another suggestion for clear communication is that we should communicate the AM and PM changes to the parents early so that they can make any adjustments to their routine. On February 3rd, Mr. Rupert and Mr. Gifford from the committee met with Dr. Berkowitz and myself to talk about the parameters for the school day and how to discuss how to present it to the community. We had a follow-up meeting on February 9th with the following committee members present to go over a rough draft of this presentation and to discuss once again the parameters of the school day. So the proposed day, the students would be picked up between 8:05 and 8:20. The students would arrive between 8:20 and 8:35. At 8:45, the students would be in their classrooms, and that's when the instructional day would begin. At 2:45, the instructional day would end, and the students who walked or picked up by their parents would be dismissed, and dismissal for those who ride buses would begin at 3 p.m. Just to show it in a kind of a little bit of a time frame, we'll see that the teachers will be arriving at the building at 8 o'clock. As we already said, the bus arrivals between 8:20 and 8:35. Same with parent drop-off. The beginning of the instructional day would be 8:45. The walkers dismissed, and the instructional day ends at 2:45. Bus dismissal would begin at 3 o'clock, and the end of the teacher's day is at 3:20. And it was important for us, when we talked about it as a committee, to make sure that if the buses are dismissed at 3 o'clock, that if a bus runs late, if parents are late to pick up a student, that teachers are still in the building for a sufficient amount of time to cover that. This is an idea of the way that bus routes would work. Currently, we have 9 bus routes. The buses would pick up the students, beginning at 8:05. Buses would arrive, you'd see that 5 buses would arrive at the 3-5 building, about 8:20, 8:25. The following buses, say route 6 through 9, would arrive at the K2 building at the same time. Between 8:25 and 8:35, the buses would travel from the first building they were at to the second elementary building, and then they would arrive at their building by 8:35. Dismissal, the parents who pick up their students or students who walk would begin at 2:45. Students who ride the bus at either school would be dismissed at 3 p.m. In both schools, the students would be dismissed at their respective schools and taken directly home, not to a different school. Students will not be transferred at either elementary school, and the longest bus run on the ride home currently is between 20 minutes to 32 minutes. This shows the same kind of scenario for the afternoon run. The students at 3 o'clock are picked up at either the K2 or 3-5 building, and they are taken directly home. This shows the bus routes, and it's difficult to see on here with the lights, but these are the dismissal. It shows the 4 buses and the routes, the tentative routes that they're currently traveling. Let's see. And the next map just shows the dismissal from the 5 buses coming out of the 3-5 building. The length of the bus runs, in the morning, the average mileage for the bus run from where we are right now is approximately between 4.5 miles per day per run, up to almost 9 miles per day per run. The AM time is averaging about 25 to 30 minutes. The PM mileage is almost between 6 miles per day to almost 10.5. PM is a little bit longer, 22 minutes to 32 minutes. And the last drop-off time that we have right now is at approximately 3:37. In the runs that we currently have, we have built in additional time for drop-offs in the morning, and they're much more conservative. If you recall, when you receive your bus runs now, or you have in the past, over the first few weeks of school, those runs are tweaked a little bit, and they're usually compressed a little bit due to the driver getting to know the students who's running the buses. So this is the most conservative estimate with the lengthiest runs that we have this time. The key changes from when we first discussed grade level schools was that we are dismissing the walkers early enough so that any parent that has to drive to pick up a student could be home in sufficient time to meet their other children or child or children to get off the bus. And the morning bus arrivals between the buildings has been reduced by 10 minutes due to continually fine-tuning the bus schedules. And as a result, the supervision time in the building has been reduced. The next steps, as the superintendent mentioned, last week we had kindergarten registration. As soon as all the registration is entered into our student management system, we'll take a download of that and start routing the kindergarten registration. In March, we anticipate that our safety consultant will come in and meet with administrators so that we can review the arrival and departure routines at each building. In April, on Superintendent's Conference Day, our drivers will drive attended routes. We've invited committee members to participate in that. After that, we will make any changes or suggested changes to the routes, and the Transportation Committee will continue to meet and review the progress. In July, we're going to review the routes again, final bus routes. The committee will review the final bus stops again, and information will be sent out to the parents.
That is the presentation that is online and has been for at least a couple weeks, along with all the appendices and such that were referenced. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, please feel free to log out of our website and take a look. So that is basically our agenda for tonight, so we will invite comment. Again, limit yourself to about 3 minutes. And feel free to step up to the mic, please state your name.
Scott Smackenberg, I live on Raker Road. I'll give that to indulge my wife and I gotta do this.
If you don't want to split it, that's fine, you can just, one of you can present it.
Thank you, Jim. We just figured I'd get tired here in one place.
It's up to you.
Okay. You have that presentation in front of you. I don't want to rehash things you've already seen in the presentation that we gave last fall. But in a nutshell, what we're trying to say is that our district must create a legitimate long-term strategic plan that both addresses our financial challenges but also maintains our core attribute of excellence. In our earlier presentation, we expressed our concerns about the potential negative educational impact of moving to grade level schools. Under this plan, we will see increased transitions and larger class sizes, especially for Nassau students, whose class sizes in some cases will nearly double. A body of research has shown that high achievement is associated with longer grade spans and that lower achievement is associated with increased transitions. It seems that research has fallen on deaf ears. In an effort to bring home the reality of the potential impact, I did a study comparing the performance of 6 similar local K through 2, 3 through 5 schools like we're proposing to go to, which are the Dutchess County schools plus New Paltz, which we've been given as an example, with a dozen similar K through 5 schools on the state ELA and math tests. The results are striking. The K through 5 schools are considerably better in terms of having their students meeting the standards, especially in math. But where the difference really shows up is in terms of producing students who excel. A student in a K through 5 school is 19% more likely to score at level 4 ELA and 53% more likely to score at level 4 in math. The differences are even larger just Spackenkill itself, where for every 20 students who excel in a GLS school, 30 students excel at Spackenkill. We've been told over and over again that our students will be just fine under GLS, and while many of them will, some will not. In any case, our goal for our children is not for them to be just fine, but for them to excel, and we feel the best way for them to do it is with our neighborhood schools. We already have a local example of what might happen. Pine Plains District moved to GLS in 2010, so I was able to compare how 2 cohorts of students did after the change. Not surprisingly, both the 3rd and 4th grade cohorts experienced declines in the next year after the change. There is little doubt that locally, the achievement gap between typical K through 5 and typical GLS schools is significant, especially in producing high achievers. And we urge the board to consider this before moving forward with this change, particularly in light of the national research that shows the same thing. We've also frequently made the point that similar savings for next year can be made under neighborhood schools, and I know you all know that. The numbers all coming from the district have changed so often that it's difficult to pin it down exactly, but it's going to be close either way next year. And additionally, GLS will be losing 1.4 more teachers than we would under what we would view as a plan under the current structure. Looking long-term, the most recent version of the district's 3-year fiscal plan severely impacts our community and the quality of education that our children will receive. In summary, the plan eliminates over 21 teachers, a full librarian, a high school TA, and all 5 of our valuable kindergarten TAs. Clubs will be eliminated, and we will see severe reductions to the athletics programs and no field trips in grades K through 8. This is not to mention many other cuts that are planned. What does the depth of these cuts achieve for our children? Shorter grade spans with more transitions, significantly increased class sizes, and decreased continuity of experience and instruction as teachers are laid off. All of these changes are associated with lower student achievement. Do we want to see our children in class sizes in excess of 25 in grades 1 through 5, and kindergarten classes of around 20 with no TA? I don't think so. In addition, of the 53 available elementary classrooms, only 25 will be in use by the 2014 school year for regular classes. We feel stronger there's a better way, and we must treat the root causes of the budget gaps rather than resorting to deep cuts at the instructional and student activity levels. How might we do this? First, we must address the far-reaching problem of the increase in health care benefit costs. As Ms. Maloney's recent presentation has shown, the main reason that our rollover budgets put us so far above the tax cap are increases in salary and benefit costs. We believe that these root causes of our future deficit should be addressed and that we need to stop treating symptoms by continually cutting teachers. Currently, our employees contribute far less toward their health insurance than private and other public employees. The New York State Public Employees Union signed a contract last summer that called for them to contribute 16% toward individual policies and 31% for family policies. If we were to negotiate a change in health care contributions that put us in line with that union, as the governor has recommended, we would save roughly $1 million, all but eliminating next year's deficit. We actually recommend, though, phasing the change in over 3 years, putting a substantial dent in the projected shortfall in each of the next 3 years. Alternatively, we could negotiate a 2% yearly cap on the increase in the district's contribution to health insurance, achieving similar savings while providing the district with some health care cost certainty and potentially keeping employees' contribution to health insurance lower should the rate of the increase in health costs decline. The precedent set in the superintendent's most recent contract, where her health insurance premiums increased by only 1% yearly, is a bad precedent for future negotiation, and is only a drop in the bucket toward the type of health care cost savings that we need to achieve.
Second, we must address the rate of wage increases. despite an assumption that the teachers would not receive a cost of living increase. This is far too high. Contracts need to be renegotiated so that salary increases, including step, go up at a rate no higher than the tax cap if we are to have a sustainable budget. To do otherwise with salaries and benefits, we are consigning ourselves to future budgets that take more and more from our children, cutting instruction and services to the bone. The purpose of the tax cap was not to cut teachers, but to get districts to address the runaway costs that have had school budgets increasing at far above the rate of inflation for years. Third, we must control administrative costs across the district. A $400 a month car allowance in one of the geographically smallest districts in the county is outrageous. Even if 4,000 miles per year were logged in service to the district, at current IRS reimbursement rates of 55.5 cents per mile, that would cost the district $2,220, less than half of the $4,800 currently paid. Some other ideas include reducing or eliminating the number of smartphones provided to district staff, freezing travel, dues, and other fees unless critical to perform duties. We must also seriously pursue the recommendations of the recent transportation study to reduce our spare bus inventory and renegotiate costly transportation labor contracts, or even to fully outsource the transportation program. Fourth, we must look at the district as a whole and perform an impartial study of the most efficient use of district infrastructure. Under the current plan, our elementary schools will be at less than half capacity by 2014. The middle and high school will be at far below capacity as the current elementary cohorts move to the district. Is this a truly efficient use of our buildings, finances, and energy consumption? Having 4 buildings in a district of this size is extremely costly because the district has a distinct disadvantage when trying to address future budget gaps. An impartial study of building use and grade span configurations would provide the district and the community with a long-term plan for making the best possible use of all our buildings and resources. We could look at K through 4, K through 8. It doesn't mean closing Nassau. Savings coming from a more efficient use of our infrastructure will have less impact on our students and come from economies of scale and administrative and support staff, rather than wholesale cutting of teachers. While there may be capital improvements required to one or more of the buildings in order to make the changes, the cost of these improvements and any debt service would not be subject to the tax cap. Finally, we must carefully reconsider use of reserve funding to absorb some cuts without reducing services. According to Governor Cuomo's message last February, school districts have $1.5 billion in reserves and unspent federal funds that will allow many to absorb the proposed $1.5 billion cuts without service reduction. Have we seriously looked at what the short-term use of portion of these funds would mean for our district? It is irresponsible for the district to rely upon achieving a 60% budget approval in future years, given that our taxes are by far the highest in the county. It is better to plan fiscally sustainable and academically sound changes now. As we've shown in this presentation, the current plan is neither sustainable nor sound. We urge the board to weigh the cost versus benefits of this situation. Are the significant negative educational impacts worth the minimal financial gain of GLS? Are the risks to our children worth the financial rewards that only come if there are large class sizes? GLS doesn't lower spending. Huge class sizes and teacher layoffs will be what saves money. We will lose teachers, our children will lose services and support, and the Spackenkill School District will be a shadow of its former self. The 3-year fiscal plan with GLS is the portion of the district with little left to cut, one that would probably have to merge with the larger neighboring district to have a sustainable future. GLS is nothing but a fiscal band-aid, a move that is akin to a rearranging of the deck chairs on the Titanic. Long-term change must address economic imbalances across the whole budget, particularly by negotiating sustainable contracts and by making a more efficient use of our infrastructure, or we will continue to whittle away at the tradition of excellence and spirit of continuous improvement that our community holds dear.
I just want to make sure I understand this. The savings, correct me if I'm wrong, that was $130K over 3 years? No, is it $400K over 3 years?
About 900,000.
No, just the, I'm sorry, GLS versus,
Oh, the difference.
the difference in the savings, sorry.
It's about 300,000.
300,000 over 3 years. Okay.
Well, plus the cumulative cap.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. Could you explain that to me? that's what,
Total district's about 34 million, 39.
so these savings are applied to a $40 million budget.
Yes.
So we're gonna save 300,000 over 3 years on a, so 100,000 a year on a $40 million budget.
Before you continue with that, you can't use that 38, 39, $40 million, because you can't cut from the entire budget. You can only cut from a portion of that. That's where, Mr. Chep.
I'm not being a wise guy.
No, what I'm trying to explain that. Most, 80% of that, for that budget is state mandates. So you can't touch
And it's
that.
the fixed contractual stuff that the previous two people were talking about? Okay.
Well, it's your mandates of education loans, your ELAs, your aids, your, all that stuff, which can't be touched.
So what we're gonna do is, because we can't touch that, because we don't wanna get into the contract negotiations.
No, it has nothing to do with contracts. That's what's mandated by the state that you need to provide, not contractual.
Some is mandated, some, there is contractual, obviously. Obviously, you
Yeah.
have to wait for contracts to expire, which it will be, and will be in contract negotiations, but that isn't gonna help next year. As a matter of fact, we put the assumption when putting our budget together this year of a zero increase in the contract, and we have to cut 1.3 million to come within the cap,
All right,
so.
all right, I was just trying to understand, because I still
If you
don't
can
quite
take
understand.
that 1.3 and push it over the entire amount, yeah, it'd be a lot easier to do that. But when you're